So, Star Trek Picard. Picard was one of those series that had a lot of appeal in its pitch. It's the first Star Trek series since, I think, either Star Trek Nemesis or the end of Voyager. I forget which one was second. I think Star Trek Nemesis was the latest thing. But in any case, it's the first thing since Star Trek Nemesis that's actually meant to be set in the future of the franchise, which would actually attempt to carry the Star Trek series forward into the future rather than just meandering back in the past with things about the Kirk era or things about the birth of the Federation with Enterprise, right? We've had a solid 2 decades of Star Trek that have just been essentially prequels. So this was the first true sequel to Star Trek in some times, and I think expectations for this were pretty high. In fact, most people I knew were ready to be impressed, myself included, I would say. I was excited about the idea of it. I felt that, going by the promotional art and everything like that, that what they were going for was some sort of Picard version of the movie Logan, right? The movie Logan was, of course, quite wonderful, and I felt that they were just going to try to do that with the character of Jean-Luc Picard, which is maybe not the best fit, but it was as good an idea as any, and I came into this wanting it to be good. But then it aired, and today it finished, and I'm sad to say that I feel that it just sucked. And, there are a lot of different reasons for that. I'm going to give you five, starting with the bottom at number five. So, reason number five, why did Picard suck? So, not giving a fuck about the details. So, let's start with a very small thing. So, the Borg. The Borg in this series, they have some sort of new mega teleporter. A teleporter that they got from assimilating one species for another. I'm pretty sure that there was an episode of TNG that had that kind of teleporter in it. So there's a super teleporter that they have, regardless of where they got it from. So it's said that the Borg use this super teleporter as a fail-safe, right? So that if their Borg cube is getting blown up or whatever it is, they can evacuate their queen, because apparently the queen is super important, and, if the cube's about to explode, you got to get the queen out to safety. Great. So, why don't the Borg use this technology for anything else? Why can't you just teleport a bunch of drones onto a planet and assimilate everyone? In fact, now that you have this mega teleporter, why do you even have cubes at all? So, this is the problem. This series did not think about the full consequences of its ideas. I think that teleporter, the only reason it's there is that they needed a way to get Picard from the Borg cube to Riker's planet. So that's why it was there, right? You need that, so we're going to put it in. But that's stupid and it's lazy, because what it tells me is that the writers were not thinking about, well, why or what would the Borg do with this teleporter other than just get their queen out? Why do they even have cubes anymore if you can just send drones from planet to planet willy-nilly, right, using these super teleporters? So that's a bit of a problem. I'll give you another example. Those flower things. So, these flower things, they're a weapon. What is this weapon designed to do? Okay, they latch onto enemy ships and drag them down to the planet. Not to burn up an atmosphere or anything, they drag them down, and once the ships are on the planet, they appear to be intact, right? The Borg cube was intact, and Picard's ship was also intact, right? So it seems like size doesn't matter there. But, okay, let's think about that for a moment. There's an enemy ship in orbit, and you're going to bring it down intact onto your planet, right? That's your defense. So you slam the enemy ship down onto your planet, and everyone on that ship is still alive, and you are still a dinky village of android people. So you crash the ship, onto the planet and then leave it there. And then what? A Romulan warbird is supposed to have a crew complement of 1,500 people. What kind of defense system would if you plant that many enemy soldiers on your planet without killing any of them, then are you really helping matters? Right? What are you going to do about the 1,500 people on the cube? This is your defense? Why is that your defense? That doesn't make any sense. It seems like they just wanted to make some pretty flowers, and that's that. Right? Didn't really think through what's the logic of this. So, this is lazy science fiction writing. Now, Star Trek has always had these little things, whether it be time travel or whatnot, but this is just thoughtless, right? Technologies here are being introduced and used for the convenience of the plot, mainly to get Jean-Luc Picard from point A to point B, and not even a touch of thought is put into the full implications of these ideas. So it's, I found it to be a series that's ultimately just fundamentally uncurious about its own subject matter. There's no more thought put into these ideas beyond what is immediately needed right then and there by the writers. And, science fiction in Star Trek Picard is honestly just so much fairy dust. Number 4, not giving a fuck about the setting. So, Star Trek fights are not dogfights, right? They're not meant to be World War II style, loop-de-loop kind of fights with a lot of dodging. These fights were always supposed to be capital ship battles, where you have two ships go at each other with phasers and torpedoes, with the only attempt to dodge being confined to Riker saying evasive maneuvers. This, though, is gone in Star Trek Picard. Instead, they went with a Firefly or Expanse style of dogfighting, where, you see the ship doing loop-de-loops, dodging, weaving, getting around those phaser beams, which I thought were supposed to travel at the speed of light, by the way, so how are they dodging that? But with that aside, it's not Star Trek, right? There's no attempt here to modernize the Star Trek battle, and there's no love really shown for the source material. And I think what really killed part of me here when I was watching this series was actually that bit in the last episode, where Riker comes in to save the day with his fleet of Federation starships, all of which were the same damn ship copy and pasted over and over, right? Just one single model of starship, right? There was no Akira class in there, there was no Excalibur class in there. It was all just that, whatever it is, it looked some sort of Galaxy or Sovereign class thingamajig. But there was only one kind of ship, right? And that's never been the case in Star Trek. And what that tells me is that whoever was designing those ships was like, one's enough. Whatever. What am I going to do? Design more than one ship? Who do you think I am? How much do you think I'm being paid here? Come on. More than one ship, please. So, again, what that shows me is that they don't really care about that aspect of Star Trek, and the setting, they don't. That's just so much background noise to them. The other thing that really bothered me in terms of setting was what they did with the synthetic thing, right? The synthetics from another dimension who are going to show up and they're going to get rid of all organic life, which they've done, by the way, once before. Okay, look. Why is Star Trek using ideas from Warhammer 40k? Why is the main villain, or I don't know if we can call him the main villain, why are whatever those things here? Why are the Necrons in Star Trek? Can someone tell me that? If there's ever any setting that is the polar opposite of what Star Trek was supposed to be, right? It's Warhammer 40k. And now we have Picard trying to prevent a Necron invasion. Why? Number 3. These characters suck. So, I have to say, all of the non-Picard characters in this series were forgettable at best and stupid at worst. I divide them into two sections. First, you've got the Firefly crew. So, imagine you finally got that Firefly reboot that you've been waiting for however many years now, right? Or maybe it gets the sequel that you've always wanted, right? Because that's a story that absolutely has to be told, right? Right? No, is it? But we'll leave that aside. So, the pilot of the new Serenity is Rios, and the first officer of the ship is Raffi. Okay, so are you with me so far? Do you think either of those characters would not fit in Firefly? Yeah, this is the problem, right? You've got someone who is writing a Star Trek sequel, but it's clear what kind of science fiction the person prefers, right? It's clear what they would rather be writing the sequel to. Oh, I don't want to write a sequel to Star Trek The Next Generation, but Firefly is way better than Star Trek The Next Generation. Let's just do a Firefly thing. Then you've got the anime crew. So, first there's Agnes. Now, if Agnes were in an anime, she would need to be changed a little bit. She would have to be 15 years old, and she would need to trip a lot. But there would be no need for any other major changes, because Agnes is a Moblob Lowly character, right? She's a Moblob Lowly character being played by a 32-something actress. And, I can't even begin to say how much I hated this character. Like, it's just completely ridiculous. Then there's Elnor, a Romulan who's a swordsman because of arbitrary reasons. You'd think that if Picard wanted a sword guy, that he would have some Klingons that owed him a favor or two, right? Fans of the classic series are not generally going to think, okay, you need a swordsman, let's go to the fucking Romulans. But, he's there, and I found his entire presence to be two things. Number one is embarrassing, because, it's just such a silly character that's out of, I don't know, some B-list science fiction series. Oh, it's the sword guy in space. Come on. But also completely unnecessary. What did this guy do in the entire series? Right? He fought some Romulans here and there, but was he important? If all of his scenes were deleted and they just did the whole thing without him, right, would the story have changed that much? What did he contribute? What was the point of having this guy here? Other than just to fill up some time, I guess. But more importantly, is there anyone out there that liked any of these new characters? Would anyone watch a series just about Rios or just about Agnes? Would anyone want to have a scene with Rios instead of a scene with Commander Riker? Or a scene with Agnes instead of a scene with Dr. Beverly Crusher? No, no one would want that. And that's because these guys are bit players, right? They don't get any hook with the audience. They don't connect. They're just there. And it sucks. Number 2. Picard is not about Captain Picard. So, the Picard of the Next Generation was someone whose primary characteristic is being the captain. His main interaction with the crew was through the use and exercise of power. He makes plans, he enforces discipline, and he speaks with moral clarity. One of the key facets of this character is that he is in control, but utilizes that with such moral clarity and a consistent intellectual framework that, you're left sort of in awe of him. Make it so isn't just a catchphrase, it's a fundamental expression of his character. So to have him replaced with this old retired guy is a bit of a whiplash. I understand that Patrick Stewart said that this is not the same Jean-Luc Picard as you may remember, which is fair enough to an extent, but the series is still called Star Trek Picard, right? That's what you're billing it as, right? It's not Star Trek Old Man, it's Star Trek Picard, right? And to make him into this doddering old idealistic guy, right, who just sort of deferred to other people and who, was never really in charge, right, but rather just sort of doing stuff, right? It didn't feel at any point like I was watching Jean-Luc Picard. It rather felt more that I was watching Patrick Stewart. So that's that honestly just made me sad. Number one, the future is dead. So the Federation of Planets is a vision of a post-capitalist socialist utopia. The idea of the Federation is it's a universe where people have evolved beyond the need for goods and for money. If you need food, you get it from a replicator. If you need a place to live, you'll have it. You work not for money, but for the betterment of yourself. But that's not this Federation. I think the point in Picard where I realized that this whole thing was going to suck was the bit where the clone datas were working with those people on Mars who were yelling things like, hell yeah! Who the fuck were those people? No, seriously, think about them. Why are there working class characters on a Star Trek show? Why are there these people who are clearly just there to punch their 9 to 5s? They're not engineers like Chief O'Brien, right? They're not cadets, right? These were clearly meant to be working class schlubs, right? The blue collar types, right? And that is something that the Federation is supposed to have done away with eons ago, right? That's what the whole point of the Federation is that, technology has evolved to a point where, you don't need to be some working class schlub on the Martian shipyards because, well, the only reason you'd have to work in person on a starship is because, well, you need to experiment with your design, or you're working on your goddamn master's thesis, or something like that, right? That's what should be the working class in Star Trek. But these guys instead, well, they're from something else, aren't they? Right? These characters would fit right in Firefly. They would fit right in The Expanse, right? They would fit in and all of that other stuff, right? But this isn't the Federation, not the Federation of Star Trek. That kind of optimistic future is apparently not appropriate for us modern audiences, right? We still have to have an underclass. We still have to have the separation of rich and poor, right? We still have to have, apparently, Jean-Luc Picard needing to hire a ship, right? This is a man who preached in First Contact about how he doesn't get paid. He only works for the betterment of himself, right? But here he is, like, yeah, Rios, I'll cut you a check. Don't worry, I'm rich. I was an admiral. Like, that's not Star Trek, right? And I feel that's the saddest thing about Star Trek Picard, because, Star Trek in its classic form was a vision of a humanity that has gotten past all this stuff, right? We're at the final frontier, right? All of the previous frontiers, hunger, right? Poverty, starvation, disease, all of it, that is gone, right? Instead, we're just left with the curiosity of the human psyche, right? We're just left to seek out new life and new civilizations, right? And boldly go where no man has gone before. But this Star Trek, well, instead of that, you're not going to any place you've never seen before, right? You're not seeking really anything. Instead, it's just the usual tales of corruption, of villains, and all of that stuff. And that's just sad. It's a letdown. The future finally came again, but, well, it wasn't what we were hoping for.